Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Close. I teach at Wichita State University, and this is an assignment that my advanced reporting students frequently do. It's called Death and Dying, or as I put it to them, the hardest assignment they'll ever do. I think you'll see why in a minute. So the assignment is a in-depth profile, which we're all used to assigning to our students. But in this case, it happens to be of someone who is dying from a terminal illness. This means they have to talk to somebody who is diagnosed to die within a year. And it involves multiple interviews with that person and with many of their friends and relatives. Caregivers, in other words, doctors and nurses, sometimes that's difficult to get permission, and other outside experts that can contribute information for the story. So I asked them to paint a picture of a person and their struggles. So it sounds like the toughest feature story in the world, and it can be. But I want them to write a story and research a story about the life of someone, all their triumphs and tragedies. Actually, a lot of times there's irony involved in these stories, depending on what they're dying from. I expect them to write a story that has lots of narrative, anecdotes, history, uh, captures the subject's personality and provides colorful details. In other words, all the qualities that you have associated with good literary quality journalism. I asked them to do research on the illness and its impact on that person and on society. So the story requires a lot of time. They get most of a semester to work on it, along with a couple, three other stories. Requires obviously a lot of tact and caring and the ability to write about both that person and the big picture, the disease in general. Usually the length varies. That's the 1,750 to 2,000 words is the usual range, but sometimes somebody will write something a little shorter, a little longer that really can't be added to or trimmed, and so I am very flexible with that. I do ask them to provide photos, either that they take or arrange for someone else who's skilled in photojournalism to take. And if they happen to get it published, which happens once in a while, they get extra credit for that too. So the rationale for this kind of assignment is obviously to do several things: to develop the highest level possible of their interviewing and people skills. It's one thing to interview somebody who just won the Rose show. It's another thing to confront somebody who's literally on their deathbed. It's also helps them build confidence in writing about difficult subjects. Um, the the difficulty of that is the reason for that is that we want to prepare them for a professional career. It's also to create storytelling journalism, extraordinary value. So we talk a lot about narrative journalism and creative nonfiction. To confront ethical decision making and privacy issues. Obviously, there's a lot involved in an assignment like this. To have them abandon their comfort zone, not get more comfortable, but completely abandon it and reach out and try really hard to reach that next plateau of journalism, and to share their own ongoing process with progress with the class and with me. And sometimes that's difficult to get people to do, but these people take it. This is a 500 level course. It is available for undergraduate and graduate course credit, so they need to be able to reach that level by now. Some of the difficulties, obviously, are fear of the topic. A lot of people are afraid of talking about death. Uh, Inability to find subjects and initiate contact. We do a lot of brainstorming in class to try to do that. How do you find somebody who's dying? And I try to discourage them from using family members, but sometimes that is allowable. Anxiety in dealing with family and friends, because sometimes those people are very helpful to a story and they can actually be helpful in getting convincing sources to let the students interview them, and sometimes they can be an impediment. Getting permission to interview and photograph. Sometimes formal permission is required of certain subjects. Uh, Getting their drafts done on time. Well, that's a problem with all journalism students, but because this is a complex story, they're a little slower to get started and to get drafts done so we can handle that. And that's because we critique this stuff in class after they turn in every draft, and I critique it personally myself. And then lastly, fear that the subject will die prematurely, and it happens. It happens on an average of about two out of about, let's say there's 10 students in the class, a couple of people, the subjects will die before this assignment is completed. And in one case, a student had to find 3 different subjects, and he had to abandon the first 2 because they passed away prematurely. And he was able to finally complete the assignment with a third person. This is one that students will tend to want to give up on. I provide help by having lots of class discussions. We brainstorm everything from possible subjects. We review ethics and law issues. We do in-class interviews and what I call death knock practice. When you have to do a story sometimes by knocking on someone's front door or their house, and so there's been a death of someone, and we practice doing those. We practice and beefing up their interview skills. There's a baseline writing test. I want to make sure that even though they're supposed to have gotten really good journalism skills by this point, not all of them do. And then there's questions and answers galore. I have them do research, relevant popular and scholarly articles, books, videos. We have lots of visits from experts, hospice directors, grief counselors, survivors, people whose family members have passed away, religious leaders, undertakers, and skilled journalists who do this sort of thing on a pretty regular basis. We usually visit and tour the county morgue, which in our county is extremely up to date and extremely professional. And then I present some of my work for them to review in person, not to both to give them examples of what I'm looking for, and also to teach them proper critique techniques so that they know how to critique each other's work. There's a million sources out there for tips and advice, and I just picked one. This was from a piece that Mallory Jean Tenor did for Poynter several years back, and there's a link there. And among her tips are, give traumatized sources a reason to tell their story, because as we all know, a lot of people, once they've been convinced with the importance of their story, will be happy to cooperate. Some people won't. If you can't get through with phone calls, emails, and door knocks, and we all know that students sometimes want to rely on email, especially, and phone calls, write a letter. Consider teaching them the art of writing a letter to try to get access. Slow down and be patient. You're dealing with one of the most difficult subjects there is, and so you can't do a 30-minute rush job interview and call this story done. She suggests that reporters acknowledge the vulnerabilities of sources and try to abstain from judgment of any feelings they have, either positivity towards passing on and going to be with God, or negativity and bitterness about dying prematurely. She suggests that journalists find something that resonates with the sources and ask sources to talk about their ambitions. What are their goals? A surprising number of people who know they are dying are upbeat and positive. That's sometimes the more difficult story to write. And probably doesn't teach students as much as a story that actually challenges them. And then, obviously, this is a good piece of advice for any story, but I think she put it very well in her article. Let sources know that their story could help others. That's a prime motivator I've found for convincing sources to be a part of this experience. And you have to teach the students how to become professionals, because this course in our program is one of the last courses they'll take, and most of them will go on to working at some sort of journalistic endeavor, whether it's broadcast or print, or even doing podcasting. And so this assignment really stresses them, tests them to the length of their ability, sometimes drives them crazy, but one of the things that they can always do, in fact, I require it, I don't know if I mentioned this a minute ago, is they have to have frequent one-on-one meetings with me. And these days that might mean a Zoom meeting, but usually it's one-on-one. So again, my contact information, I'm Dan Close. I'm at dan.close@wichita.edu. There's my phone number in my office, area 316-978-6058. Contact me anytime if you have any questions or want some more help. Thanks a lot.